You know, yeah, yeah.
You know.
I've really got notes here.
Exactly why. You guys looked at mine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
I
chess.
didn't know. They had left.
Yeah.
Talk about it. For a while.
A lot.
What county?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out, I've never read. You know, a lot of things that put on my report.
Below.
The reason why.
That's like. That's what keeps you going.
Yeah, it does, I think it does.
How was your trip? I didn't get to ask you.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Did you go alone or you went with a group or?
I was distracted last week when I was here, so it's a good day to have.
Yeah. Did you go with a group or you?
No. I go with a friend. I go there every year.
Oh, did you go to the shows or what did you
Go
go?
to the show. Took in,
Oh, that's
you know, a
nice.
whole bunch of shows, concerts.
What do you recommend is coming here?
Oh, I don't know what's,
Okay.
yeah, what I won't recommend is,
They had Cinderella got terrible reviews.
Oh, bad
Yeah,
Cinderella.
got terrible reviews. It got banned in the New York Times.
I'll think of it, it was so bad that I forgot the name.
Oh,
But
no.
it's coming.
We took the Banshees of Inisherin. Oh.
Wow, weird, huh?
You know, I.
Yeah, really good. But you know what? You never forget it.
Yeah.
But here I saw Camelot and it was wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
I just saw that last night, I walked over and someone was selling a ticket,
Oh, really?
a one cheap ticket, and I was like, yes, please.
Oh, wow.
So I went last night, and
Oh, nice.
although it was a cheap seat, so
It doesn't make it here.
it was, the sound was a little off
Yeah.
up there, but overall it was pretty
Good.
I've always wanted to do that.
great. I bet Lindsay would like that. Yeah, it's based on the.
That's the future, is one to forget.
Oh, okay.
It's based on the Washington.
He might come in the beginning.
It's sad, you know.
I was there. When Freddie Laker.
So you were just walking around Broadway and.
It's a better, and
I
knew, I,
Yeah.
really high.
Some bar and night, so what, yes, he was down with restaurant.
Yes.
Oh.
But it was in winter, it was January, also, I'm very hard on the section, I did it on February, and so really, it was heavy, it's for everything.
Uh-huh.
And before I was a little kid, so I got into the bottom.
New space yesterday, now.
That's fun.
That like. I think it's fine.
No, I did it so, yeah.
I think it's.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
The bagels are here. Hey. Dig in.
Oh, they're done.
Thank you.
This son.
Oh, thanks. He's got his braces on. Yeah. Thank you.
Um. That Susan has a doctor's appointment.
Oh, okay.
Really appreciated your reaching out.
Oh, good. That's you.
He's doing okay, he's just strong.
Oh. Where?
Face down.
Yeah, face down. Looks no good.
You know, one of the great quandaries of life, is that since we know that bread always side down, and a cat always makes on its feet. What would happen if a piece of bread with butter was strapped to a cat's back? Which way was? Butter the cat. Right.
Now, just one thing that had come up, she has a very good friend who hadn't called her much after, you know, and she asked her why. And well, I did something very called in the group, and my mom had died, and I arrived at a meeting and nobody said anything. And
Oh, really?
I brought it up, I said, what is in my name?
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be already, so I thank you. Okay.
That don't know what to say.
So, reinforcement, that's what it means, is a whole.
Right, yeah, exactly, it's not even word related.
Right, for good behavior. Yeah. Not meant to be that late.
Good morning, Lee.
It wasn't a road. But I will be working, doing a workout at some point, and then depending upon whether the cable person has come and gone, or if I get home or not.
Everybody has that same ring.
And then some people know to turn it off.
I think that's the default one.
Which,
Hmm.
what did you do now?
Hi, Judy.
Hi again, Rabbi.
How's it going?
Fine. Going fine today.
Isn't it good when he reminds us to turn
All
off?
right, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Nina, welcome back.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back. All right, so one housekeeping note before we start. The temple office is moving, for the sake of ease. We're moving our activities all to one Zoom link. There is only one exception, that's the morning minion. It's gonna stay at the same link that it's been on, because but everything else that happens at Temple Beth-El, services or classes, it's all just gonna be on one link. starting in next week, April 1st. So that way you just have the link and you want to participate in something, you join on that link. Including this class. So please look in your Temple Beth-El weekly email for the information about it, but I just want to draw your attention to it. The only one that is not changing is the morning meeting. Okay, but everything else is going to be just on one link. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher ishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot. Okay, so let's open up, we're on
32.
the 32. Last week we talked about how the prayers on 32 and 34, Kiryat Sar and Elohai Neshama work together as a pair. Kiryat Sar, which we talked about last week, is a blessing for the body, the physical body. And Elohai Neshama, which we're going to look at this week, is a blessing for the soul. And body and soul are the two, broadly speaking, the two elements of the human being, the physical, the medical aspects of the human being. And so this, that's why they work together. And then we see the same parallelism of physical and metaphysical a little bit later on in the liturgy when we get to the Yod Ser Or, the prayer in the light in the morning, and then the Ahava after the Torah. The two of those work together also, physical and metaphysical. So let's there's a lot to talk about with the soul. So we'll spend some time here in the soul. Let's read the liturgy. And talk about what we see on the page, and then we'll go from there to some various things. All right. Would somebody like to read the English translation on page 34?
Will we read?
Oh,
Aye. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it. You shaped it. You breathed it into me, and you protected it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you. Adonai, my God, and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praise to you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind.
good. All right, very nice. Thank you, Alfred. All right, so tell me, what do you what stands out to you about this liturgy? Well,
What strikes me is that everyone is equal in a way. It's a sort of a wonderful kind of thing. The humblest person, that's what I love about Judaism. I'll call Yisrael, I struck me when you said that. This morning, I don't
yeah,
struck me that, and also the idea that you can explain what you should say, my soul is pure. No one has to tell you that. It's between you and God. And it's pure. And no matter what you did, there's something inside of you is still pure.
yeah,
You have to find it, maybe,
okay. All right, so everyone has a pure soul. What you're saying? Okay, you said everyone is equal. So in what respect is that? What do you mean everyone is?
Well, in Judaism, especially when they say, and it's part of the Torah, where when
if everybody is present when we got Ten Commandments, I think, that's all right. There's something about that. There's an equality way ahead of the other groups. I feel Judaism, you have priests and everything, you have leaders, but there's something about religion that postulates equality, before God.
Okay, everyone was as part of the covenant in an equal way. Good, I wanna hold on to that, we're gonna read something, hopefully we'll get to it today, maybe it'll be next week. About, it's gonna deal with partially with the question of this issue of equality. And so we'll revisit that again. So I want to be precise in saying that you mean that everybody was equally part of the revelations. Okay, all right, good. Glenda, go ahead.
So my understanding of the difference between Judaism, one of the main differences between Judaism and Christianity is that Christianity feels that everyone was born in sin and they have to work their way out of sin to get to heaven. Judaism doesn't have that point of view. Am I correct or incorrect?
Right, everybody is created with a pure soul.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, yes, that's an important distinction.
So why did God ask us last instead of first?
What's that?
Why did God ask us to be part of the covenant last among the peoples instead of first?
Yeah, why did God ask us last? I don't know why, but we came along last that Midrash comes to teach that we weren't asked because God thought that we were intrinsically better than anybody else.
But everybody uses that as a point against us. That we feel superior.
Yeah, that's right, but that Midrash, the important aspect, the important teaching of that Midrash is that we were just on the list. I mean, there's nothing about the Israelite people that is inherently, different or better than other people. It's just we were the ones that were willing to go along. Anything else? Yeah, Lee.
It makes me, this very first line, the soul you have given me is pure. It makes me think, as many of you will remember, Mori Yochai, and I think he actually refers to it in one of his poems.
Alicia.
Besides many things, he was
You read my prayer book.
and he'd say,
Weekdays.
all started his class with an A. And it was, it's not that you start with blank slate, you start with an A. And it was up to the students to keep that A throughout the semester. So our soul is pure. And it's up to us now to do that.
To keep it that way. Okay, nice. Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Thank you, Nina.
When I look at the verbs that are associated, at least in the translation, with God's role in the soul, is God created it, made it, and breathed it into me, and then protected within me. So, and then it says, for as long as my soul is within me. And so the question becomes, at what point does the soul
not be within me.
Yeah.
You know, and, so that's, you know, a question in terms of God did all of these things to create pure soul. And now it's the responsibility for me to make sure that it is, that it lasts as long as it possibly can until I die.
Yeah,
You know, the other thing is, we always, when I look at the Hebrew, we have, it seems, 3 different ways of identifying the soul. There is the neshama, there is the nefesh, and there is the ruach. And in different places, it's used differently. And I find that I'd like to be able to connect to those Hebrew words because they really are beautiful.
yeah,
And I'd like to really understand from the Hebrew standpoint why we choose in our translation to translate them differently.
to translate those 3 words
Yeah.
differently. So how do we translate them differently? What are the?
Well, I mean, there's, well, if you go back and look at, and I think it's, you know, in the Kabbalistic, you know, view that the lowest one of the soul is ruach.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Okay,
yeah,
and then there's the ruach is breath that's within you.
yeah,
The nefesh is the way in which your soul relates to others in the community, so that it's not just an individual.
okay,
And then the neshama is kind of like the very highest way you really are connected to the God that created the soul.
yeah,
So I mean, that's just my own
yeah.
take on it, so I don't know if that's.
Yeah, there, let's see, I've seen that depicted a graphic. Hold on, I'm gonna look to see if we can find it. Yeah. No. Yeah, so there are the different level. I'm just gonna share this on the screen. I've not read any of this, but I'm just searching neshama, levels of soul consciousness. The divine soul is an individual essence inseparably bound to God. As the verse states, for part of God is his people. And as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai states about himself, my soul is one with him as one flame, cleaving to him. Nevertheless, as it emanates from the infinite one, the Ein Sof, eventually to be clothed in the physical body, the soul descends via the 5 worlds mentioned above, leaving a root in each of the worlds until it is clothed in a physical body. Thus, there are 5 levels of the soul, or levels of God consciousness, corresponding to the various planes of reality, or levels of divine revelation / concealment manifested in each of the worlds. The soul enclosed within the body is a reflection of the divine form called the Tselem Elohim. This may be described as the spiritual mold of man's physical form, linking his body and soul. The mold is derived from the configuration of the spirot, which structure the worlds through which the soul descends on its journey down into the body. Okay, so we have looked at the picture of the spirot in Kabbalah, like the little kind of DNA helix looking thing. which is the spiritual DNA of God, basically, and of all existence. Okay, so this is saying that the human soul also kind of emanates from God at the top and flows through that ladder of the spherot, and then becomes manifest in the human person. So it would be a refraction of the like pure divine soul, because it's filtered through the funnel. Okay. At the same time that the soul's outer dimension reflects the configuration of the spherot, the inner dimension of the soul reflects the infinite light, which illuminates the spherot. This reflection is called the Demut Elohim, the image of God. Thus man includes all of creation within him, from the loftiest spirituality to the most mundane physicality. Okay, so from the point of view of man's service to God, these levels of soul may be described as 5 ascending levels of awareness of and communion with God. They are called in ascending order: Nefesh, so that would be at the bottom, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechidah. Regarding these levels of soul, the Zohar states that when a person is born, he's given a nefesh from the world of Asiyah, the lowest world, representing the greatest concealment of God. If through his divine service and proper action he makes himself worthy, he is then given Ruach on the plane of Yetzirah. With greater effort, he can earn the revelation of Neshama, paralleling the world of Bria. If he purifies himself greatly, he may be able to attain the level of Chaya, paralleling Atzilut, and even Yechidah, the God consciousness of the level of Adam Kadmon. That's the first Adam, primordial Adam, and beyond. Beyond, because the level of soul called Yechidah in essence transcends all the worlds, since it is never separated from God. It is described as being truly part of God above, and as a spark of the Creator and clothed within a spark of the created. Okay, that's good Kabbalah. That's lots of Kabbalah, which is very abstract always. And as you read it, like head starts to spin what they're talking about. But Kabbalah uses abstract imagery to kind of paint this idea of connection between human beings and God, and how how that connection kind of flows from infinity into the finite physical to the infinite physical world. Yeah, Jen.
So I feel like there's a push or a tension between my soul is pure,
Mm-hmm.
and then the tradition of saying, well, you can purify yourself, you can be more pure, you can what? So are we pure enough already, or what is that purifying? It feels a little like, well, this is the tradition, you need to follow other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's an interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'm understanding this to mean that the soul that we're given is pure. It's the first order, the first level, which is the nefesh. So the rabbinic literature speaks about when a person is born, they kind of nefesh. That's the word for soul, but it also means the human life. And this is describing nefesh as the first level soul. It's pure, but then it's sounding like you can elevate, to this next level, and eventually get to level 5. You start at level 1, it's a pure level 1. But then the goal of living is to climb up through the levels and reach level 5 eventually. Howard?
I will at first concede that. I mean, I don't even get to the 5 levels because I have difficulty with abstract things in general, but accepting as much as I can accept, I want to go back to Lee's analogy to Maury's reflection. And Mount Moore's practice about starting with name. And I want to look at the tense of the very first line of the prayer. The soul you have given me is pure.
Yeah,
Okay, now, to take the Maury grade, A grade formulation, it would be the soul you gave me was pure. Past tense. And now, after all these years, it's something different. Can it be less than pure? Can you go from an A to a B, or do you only go from A to A plus to A plus plus to A plus plus plus, et cetera?
yeah. Yeah, good question. I mean, I think my thoughts on it are that, you know, through the course of living, you know, we get, you know, the soul becomes mucked up and whatnot, but it always retains its pure essence. It's just that it's covered up in, you know, gunk, I guess, as it were. And that we have to kind of clear it off. But that the essence of the soul is pure. I read it as the soul does not become you know, impure in its essence. It just becomes obscured or whatnot. Thrown off, you know, its center by living. I don't know, what do you guys think? Michael?
It's hard to reconcile a pure soul being overlaid by evil through living. And how do they explain the existence of people who did absolutely evil things? You know, how much cover, if the soul is pure, how does it lose all of its influence?
Yeah, well, so all of this begs the question which we haven't dealt with yet, which is, what is a soul? You know, soul is the ultimate in the abstract. I mean, how do you define it? Here, this says the soul, the divine soul is an indivisible essence, inseparably bound to God. The liturgy would suggest that everybody has, I mean, even Hitler had a soul, you know, that's pure, that God it gives everyone a soul which is pure. But you know, there are various factors, I suppose, in terms of, you know, in life that can muck up the soul. I mean, I don't know what it's to say that if you have a pure soul, is that equated with being, you know, a pure person in terms of your actions? I don't think we could say that, because not everybody is that way. In fact, there's probably nobody. None of us is perfectly pure. So what would it mean to say then that we have an essence that is perfectly pure, and yet none of us is perfectly pure because of how we live our lives? Karen S., go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah, I also think from a more positive, optimistic philosophy. And I'm also calling on Abraham Maslow and Erik Erikson, basic human needs. You start with the physical, of course, but there are spiritual and educational and passionate needs of the human form, human being. If the basic human needs are met, I think we grow towards the light. We wouldn't have gotten this far as a juvenile species if we hadn't learned to cooperate. But being dependent on parents, family, and the world, yeah, the soul gets mucked up. I think that's really the layers of struggle, conflict, the lack of most people to really get enough basic safety, security, trust, to grow up mentally healthy. I think that's where the soul gets mucked up. But I think I need to believe, like Anne Frank, that people are basically good at heart. And I think that's the soul, the consciousness. If you are brought up, and you've got to be carefully taught with even the beliefs that, hey, you're here on this planet for more than taking up space. And that you have a soul or a consciousness that ties you to every other living thing on this planet, no less the universe behind. How many of us had the blessing to be brought up with that kind of belief system? So I agree with you fully. The soul gets mucked up.
Like, yeah, you're born into the world with a pure soul, but then from the moment you're born, then, starts getting mucked up. I think, I mean, like, I remember, a friend of mine said one time, it's like, we parent, as soon as our kid is born, like, we start screwing him up. I mean, that's just kind of part of life, but that we're born into the world as a pure being. In that contrast, like Glenda said, we're not born into a world Christianity teaches, like already bearing some sin just by virtue of being born. Judaism is we're born with a pure and clean slate, but then we start getting screwed up immediately. But still, that essence is there. How would you define soul? Yeah, Mel.
Oh, I just want to add. I also knew Maury. And when he said,
Mel, can you speak up, please?
so when Maury used to say, I stopped my student with an A, I took it to mean, when you meet somebody for the first time, give them an A. Start them with an A. Every relationship you start with an A. And that they can display you. Now, another thing, when you said about screwing up your kids, when they're born, good intentions, And the third thing is, I just noticed this, that my God, the soul you have given me is pure. So you're asserting something, you could assert this and live your life. You decided, you know what? It's something you have to repeat every day. Also, remind yourself, you're not evil, you can't, there's something here about trying to empower yourself, make a change. Also.
Yeah, definitely. That's what Teshuvah is about. Teshuvah is, maybe you can think of it as brushing the gunk off the soul. And knowing that no matter where you stand in your life, no matter what you have done, the mistakes that you've made, etc., the essence of who you are is pure. It's there. It's just, it may just be covered up. So Teshuvah is about clearing it off and restarting. Because Teshuvah, remember, is return. So it's return to the path, return to the God, you return to God, also return to the self. It's like we live through the act of living, we become alienated from ourself, which is the pure soul. So returning is like cleaning up, getting back into place. In some ways, perhaps what Pesach, which is about next happening next week, is about a little bit with the cleaning, the physical act of cleaning out all the crumbs and and whatnot that the chametz, which is part of daily living, we clear it out for this 1 week of the year as a kind of you know, a tangible way of giving expression to this idea that we're clearing out the gunk, you know, from our lives, off our souls, and just getting pure again. I don't know, I just kind of made that up, but why not? You know? Yeah, Jody.
Well, it's hard for me to believe that, really evil people, if were despots and mass murderers, that they're also born with the same purity of soul, that there's not something in them, that they're not born with something askew somewhere from day one, from inception. Because how do you become so evil if you start out? It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around that there's not something faulty in their wiring to begin with.
Right, well, so again, though, that begs the question of how do we define soul? I mean, maybe when we say like there's faulty in the wiring, maybe that's the case, like our brain is, when we talk about our wiring, we like the neurons and whatever, and how all they work mechanically, but that's part of the body, and then there's what we call mind. Mind is different from brain. Does mind equal soul? Is that the same thing? I don't know, like I think it's a little hard to answer these questions if we don't know exactly what a soul is.
Right, but I just think there's a defect somewhere in some of these, that something's missing, either something's wrong or something's missing.
Right, but I guess that's what I mean, is maybe that like, maybe there is, but that doesn't, maybe that doesn't have to do with, right, like, maybe the soul is something that is pure, but there's some kind of defect elsewhere in the being. It's like, is a soul like fully equivalent with the whole human being? Or is a soul part of a human being? Is there other things that consists of that a human being consists of, such that those things might be defective even if the soul is pure? I don't know. And soul is so abstract.
Right. I always thought that the soul is sort of representative of what makes each of us, like our true essence.
True essence.
And one different from the next, different from the next. So
Yeah.
I think that whatever's with these evil monsters that are in our world, their soul can't be pure and good. And become so the way they become, if it starts out so pure and
Right.
good.
Well, so that's a difficulty. I mean, so the tradition says, yes, that every, human begins with a pure soul. But then, of course, we have to reconcile it with experience, and part of what we have to do is to try to gain a little bit of an understanding of this concept of soul. And not only try to define like what it is, what do we mean by it, but also is there a real thing? Is there such a thing? We're gonna read Yuval Harari. Maybe today, maybe like later, probably next week. We'll see. Karen asked was your hand up again? No.
I'm back.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm
Karen,
back.
something you want?
Yes, I still need to believe, and from my years of experience, as a therapist, as a psychologist, as a social psychologist, I still know and believe there isn't an evil baby born. We are all born of woman, and every baby loved grows towards the light. Every baby born unloved, unwanted, uncared for cannot grow towards the light. You get stunted, you get desperately needed, you're terrified, you never have a sense of basic safety or security in the world. You cannot develop trust. And this makes for shattered psyches or souls. I think soul is consciousness. I'm content to live with the ambiguity and the mystery of it all. But I know I have worked with people who've been horrifically abused and been horrible abusers. At the core of every human being, if you prick us, do we not bleed? There are basic human needs, and most of our societies never equip our families to meet those basic human needs. And that's why we have so many twisted people. And some of them have risen to too much power. I'm finished.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. It's good insight from your, professional experience. Thank you, Jen.
Continuing on your question of how do we define these different things if we're gonna understand them, like it says, my soul, all the time it remains within me. Or you protect it within me, so who's me, what's me?
Right.
That's also part of it, it's the me, the body, is the me, the body plus the mind. I think if we don't know all these definitions, it's complicated, but I think
Yeah.
it gives us a way to understand that the me part might be screwing it up, but the soul is still a perfect piece.
Could be, yeah. And so we talked about that last week too, with respect to the body and the body's relationship to me. And here we're dealing with the soul's relationship to me. And I mentioned something that, that Neil Gilman writes about the body, where he says like, well, we will often say, I have a body, but that implies a distinction between a body and me, meaning that like a body is something that I can have, and in order to have it, you have to be distinct from it. But so he says that doesn't really get at it, because it's not like a body is separate from me. At the same time, you can't say I am my body also doesn't capture it, because we know that we're more than just our. And so the same, I think could say the same thing with the soul. To say I have a soul may not capture it, because it would suggest that the soul is something like that's different from you. But to say I am my soul also misses it, because we also know that we're more than just a soul, we're also a body. We're also other things. So body and soul and me are all bound up together, sure. And it's kind of hard to make to understand what all of them are, but I think we have to try a little bit to crystallize this kind of definition of soul. Nina.
But the one thing that's missing from your, body and me and soul is God. I mean, there's, to be soul is, the way in which I connect to God. And so there's, it's everything that leads up to the Beth-El Elohim, because there's got to be this, for me, there has to be a God connection that happens when I look to define what the best part of me, which is my soul.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't here for the discussion of the body, but I know, I always struggled with the idea of the body, particularly in relationship to Bill, because that was a body that wasn't working.
Yeah.
And yet it was his body.
Yeah.
So, and I think it was more difficult for me than it was for him, which is really interesting.
Yeah,
But now we come up with the concept of the soul, and then the body just doesn't even have to exist anymore.
uh-huh,
And the connection is God. We can't leave that word out.
right, good. So just to refresh, and this is what it says here on this website. The divine soul is an indivisible essence, inseparably bound to God.
Yeah,
Yeah, so Nina, your description, I think, fits nicely with the teachings of the Kabbalah, that the soul is something that's intangible about you, but it's like the tether, like almost like the umbilical or something, like a metaphysical umbilical cord that connects the human being to God. Maybe something like that, and then there's a vertical dimension to it, like the Kabbalah says, like the 5 levels. Yeah, so, good, okay, Alfred,
I think it's a lot of it's chemistry too. Body chemistry,
okay,
that nobody mentioned, it's body chemistry.
okay. And do you feel that the body chemistry is related to the soul?
In its own way, indirectly, I think it is.
How so?
Well, you have certain chemistry, like people are evil, they come from good families and everything, but some people still evil.
Yeah,
You know, you have good parents, you could be the worst person.
right,
I'm just saying example with chemistry too.
yeah, right, so maybe it's physical elements of the human being,
Right.
body chemistry elements
Right,
that contribute to, you know, misfiring, neurons misfiring, and the twisted outcomes and behavior. Maybe it's through that and not through soul. And maybe those, I don't know, maybe, you know, as someone said, like, person could be wired wrong or chemically imbalanced, you know, or actions that happen in our environment, things that are done to us through experience can impact the wiring of the brain, and that's physical. It's the physical elements of the human being, but it does that, and it impacts upon the soul because it's all interrelated, but the soul is discrete from the physical being. All right, I wanna look at, I wanna start here, we'll dive more into soul, the meaning of soul. As we go on with this discussion, but first, I wanna start by comparing this liturgy with, the version of it in an Orthodox Siddur, because it's different. Okay, so I'm gonna share. This is the traditional text of an Orthodox Siddur. This comes from the Samson Raphael Hirsch Siddur. He has a commentary on it, which we'll read also. But I want to start by just looking at the liturgy itself. So let's look at the Hebrew, and you can follow along kind of side by side with your prayer book. Okay, so just to read our prayer. Excuse me. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Ata berata, ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. Ve'ata mishamara b'kirbi. Kol zman shehaneshama b'kirbi. Modeh ani lefanecha, Adonai Elohai, Elohai Avotai v'imotai. Rivon kol ha'ma'asim, Adon kol ha'neshama. Baruch ata Adonai, asher b'yado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol b'sareh. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you. Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of human. All right, now here's the traditional liturgy. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. That's the same, right? Ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. The ata mishamra b'kirbi. That's the same too, right? Now, Ve'ata atid litla bimenu, ulahakazira bila atid lavo. We don't have that. All right, now what that means, and then it goes on, Pozman shahaneshama b'kirbi, modeh ani lefanecha, Adonai Elohai v'Elohei avotai, and we add the emotai. Ribon kol ha'ma'asim, Adon kol ha'neshamot, that's all the same. And then we get to the Chatima, which is the little closing blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, hamachazir neshamot lifgarim metim. That's different, right? Okay, so let's look at the differences here. First, we saw a line appear. Ba'ata atid nitla mimenu lahachazira bila atid lavo. That means, where, does it give us a copy of the translation? Yeah, here it is. Okay, here's the translation. My God, the soul you placed within me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me, you preserve it within me. And here's the addition. And you will one day take it from me and restore it to me in the awaited future. Okay, so long as the soul is within me, I confess before you, God, my God, and God of my fathers, master of all works, Lord of all souls. Blessed be you, God, restores the souls to dead bodies. Okay, ours is different. All right, so tell me about this. What do you see?
Does this have something to do with, when Mashiach comes and he'll restore the resurrection and?
Yeah, exactly. So the classical rabbinic theology teaches that that will be resurrected at the end of days. It's the coming of the Messiah, the reestablishment of the kingdom of God on earth, and that that will be resurrected. So those of you who participate in the Dominion know from the part of the Amidah where we have the option Mechayeh HaKol or Mechayeh HaMetim. We in the Dominion do, or I do, I say Mechayeh HaMetim. God gives life to the dead, which is the traditional liturgy. The Reform movement changed the liturgy early on to Mechayeh HaKol. God gives life to all, which is it's a more like vague. Because giving life to all can encompass the Metim, the dead, but it's just more general because Reform Judaism had a discomfort with the idea of resurrection. Okay, so that's manifest here in this liturgy. Now, if you only pray from this prayer book, as we all do, like you would never know that. Right? You would never know that when you say this prayer, you're actually making an theological statement. And that theological statement is that we do not embrace the concept of resurrection of the dead. Now, that's not a choice that's given to you, right? Because unlike in the Amidah, where it gives you the option of saying Mechayeh HaMetim, here the excised liturgy isn't given in parentheses. So what are your thoughts about this? About the fact that we have a different liturgy and the changes that were made, and the fact that, unless I'm wrong, I'm guessing you weren't aware of that change. Nina.
Didn't we study at some point, and I'm not sure it was in this, about the idea that when a person dies, their soul remains, and that soul then becomes identified with another body, another person in the future, and that if there was anything that was tainted in that soul by the experience, then the next person who gets that soul is up to them to create, to fix that
Right,
and to make it better.
yeah, so,
Like that idea,
yeah,
but there is an idea of resurrecting of the soul. Even though you don't think about it as resurrecting. I have a problem with resurrecting the body, but I don't have a problem resurrecting the soul.
okay, so first, yes, you're referring to the Kabbalistic idea of transmigration of souls or reincarnation. And the idea is that, you know, the soul starts pure. But we know that there are the different levels, and the goal of a soul coming through the cycle of living in the world is to elevate the 5 levels to get to level 5. And so the soul is incarnated in a body because that's the only way a soul can be in the world, is in a body. And you live and you know, you can either elevate the soul to the next, the next level, and then you pass the baton, to the next person. And they do it and get it up, or maybe through the way you live, you kind of knock it down a level and the next person has to work harder to get it up. But that the Kabbalah teaches that the soul goes through the cycle of the world until it gets to level 5, and then it goes back and, into heaven. So there are maybe many different bodies that house the one soul. So yeah, how do you square that with the idea of bodily resurrection? I don't know. Maybe it's all the bodies that are have it, the soul are resurrected. This is where we read Neil Gilman, and later on, we'll see that it's important to understand that this language that we're speaking right now is not meant to be literal. It's not literal language. It's mythological. It's poetic, poetry. Poetry is not meant to be understood literally. Poetry uses words to point to something that defies words. Okay, so don't get caught up in like the mechanics of how all of this works, because A, nobody knows, and B, these are all just poetic attempts to try to capture truths that defy the capacity of human beings to know or explain. Okay, so, but the idea of the bodily resurrection, we'll see when we read Neil Gilman, how and why he will say it's critical for the reasons that we were saying before, that body is an inextricable part of who you are. Okay. It's not, the theology here in this liturgy in Judaism is not that your body is simply a shell, that can eat, that you just discard and is not essential to who you are. That does exist in other theologies, in other religious traditions, like, maybe Christian asceticism, or the idea that the body's a prison and my goal is to transcend the body. But Judaism doesn't hold that. Judaism holds this is a pair, body and soul are all bound up together. And Gilman makes the argument, it's impossible to imagine yourself without your body. Your body is an inextricable part of who you are. Same thing with your soul. So that the end, like the ultimate end of your being, in some way has to account for your body, otherwise it's not the fullness of your being. Okay, so Nina, then you said you had a problem with bodily resurrection. Can you say more about that? Because the Reform movement generally does also.
The first word is it's creepy.
Creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a comfort to know that my loved ones are being returned to their earth by being in a pine box, and that everything is going to become part of the earth again.
Yeah.
And that's comfort to me. Not the idea that there's going to be a resurrection of that body
Yeah.
at any point in time.
Yeah. Okay, good, so it may very well be, and look, there's nothing wrong with this, it may very well be that we as. Reformed Jews and products of modernity and products of a Christian environment and just everything that, you know. Impacts the way we think and see things. That we have you know, kind of taken on a way of seeing that de-emphasizes the body and the totality of our being. Maybe so, maybe you have. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, so this is all about belief and sources of, and storytelling that gives you meaning. And so, but unpacking this helps us to become aware of that, and to be able to think, to ask the question yourself, like, what role really does my body play in how I see myself? And we talked about that last time. Remember the contrasting worldviews that we saw in Greek and Roman, you know, ideology, which placed the body very, very much as the body more important than anything else. And then the argument from the authors that we read too, that we're kind of returning, we're kind of returning to that in modern secular culture of like a deification of the body. But then maybe others feel like, no, the body's actually less central to who I am. Okay, so Linda and Bill.
I have a memory of when I was a little girl. And I would say every night, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the
Lord, my soul today.
yes.
That's not Jewish.
Well, but it's, yeah, so that is that what, that's not the Lord's Prayer, what is
No,
it?
it's just it is definitely in a Christian tradition too, but it's not something, you know, right?
Right, it's. Yeah.
Traditional Jewish home.
Right. So interesting, but that, right, that's cultural syncretism, you know, like. Definitely being influenced by the Christian culture around us.
No, I
No.
it's because it just, you know, came to my mind.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I only know that prayer from like TV.
Yeah.
Right, because little kids have always do like kind of get on their knees and do it on TV and say that. Yeah. Yeah, interesting, no.
When you're looking at our version in what verse the one on the screen,
Yeah,
I noticed there's a word confess. I see that right, is that word
yeah, it's just English translation difference, the Hebrew is the same.
confess, the idea of.
Yeah. What does this say, acknowledge? I offer thanks to you. Yeah, so the Hebrew word there is modeh. Modeh, which has different senses in the Hebrew. It means to give thanks. It also means to agree, to affirm.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Also, the version in the book, it looks like the meter is more powerful. It seems that it has more of a, he's more of an equal, almost like an equal partner
In which one?
in our book.
In our verse.
Yeah, because the word God doesn't appear as, the word God appears more on the screen than it is in the book. I get the feeling this is more, the person is stronger, it's more powerful in our version. This one is like weaker,
Interesting.
that's how it looks to me that way.
Is that, and what, okay, so I just want to point out the only thing, there are two things that are different. In the liturgy. One is this statement, in the future, you'll take it from me and then return it to me in the time to come. And then the last part, blessed are you, Adonai, who returns the souls to dead bodies. Everything else is the same. So do you feel that by missing those two things about God returning the soul, that impacts the relationship of the human being God vis-a-vis God in the prayer?
This prayer is, person is at a higher level, is not so, you know, beholden to God. It appears to be more of a.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, maybe, I mean, the traditional one has the thing about like God's, you know, God's gonna take my soul from me sometime and give it back. Maybe it's also the nature of the English. You know, like compare the English, like just the English translations. That this one here is perhaps a little more formal. But it's not that the Hebrew is different, it's the way that the editors of the prayer book translated the language. One feature of Mishkan Tefillah for sure is that it uses a more colloquial style English. Compare it with the Union Prayer Book, which also used English, but used very formal, you know, Victorian English. The me and thou. The Hebrew is the same. But there is, you know, English translations. The English language has different, what do you call those? Like register or modality or, you know, like informal versus not formal and all that. Mishkan Tefillah uses a less formal style of English. And that does, and it's precisely, I think, for the reason that you're pointing out, which is to create a sense of more familiarity between us and God. That, whereas the Union Prayer Book was like, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name kind of language, way up there and we're down here. The dynamic, the relational dynamic between God and the person, people in Mishkan Tefillah is much closer. And the language, the style of the language creates. Yeah, Howard.
When you ask the question, what do we think about the fact that that language is missing?
Yeah,
I heard at least two questions. The question that we aren't discussing, and maybe you don't mean for us to discuss it, and that's fine, is the editorial.
yeah, no, I definitely wanted to discuss that.
And so I went to the introduction. And by the way, you know, for those who've never done it, take a look at the list of names of people who were involved with this, and you'll see some people that you know, including one who participates in our morning minute every day. Rabbi
Oh, nice.
But at the top of page Roman numeral 10, to me is the key sentence. It says, but the essence of Reformed liturgy continues to be what God demands of us, with heavy emphasis on ethical action and social justice. And so, yeah, as you pointed out, Rabbi, the editors made choices. In the case of the Gerudo prayer, they left in the option of Matin.
Yeah,
And in the case of this prayer, they didn't give us any parenthetical language to leave in. And I guess, I mean, at some point they had to decide, you know, where things were gonna go, whether there would be options or not, or whether they would even go with the old language entirely.
yeah,
And you know, as far as the ethical action is concerned, I mean, well, the prayers that work for me best are the prayers that urge me to be a better person. And so I'm looking at the last interpretation on the bottom of page 35, which ends with the words, "Let my eyes behold the beauty of all creatures, let my hands know the privilege of righteous deeds."
yeah,
And there, this prayer is telling me what I can do to maintain or improve or demuck the purity of my soul.
yeah,
And that I find much, again, as a guy who has trouble with abstract concepts and who's looking for concrete things, I find that to be much more helpful to me than nearly all the other language on these two pages.
Yeah. You know, it's, I appreciate that. This has come up a couple times in our prayer conversation so far about, you know, prayer, the language of prayer is helping me to be a better person. So I've been thinking about that. And I totally agree that, you know, prayers do that. What I want to unpack a little more is what does it mean to become a better person? I think what I have heard in the conversations as it comes, and as you're using it here, Howard, so far, I think is being a better person means doing kind deeds for others. That is definitely one way to be a better person. But is it possible that we could say that that by becoming a more authentic self, that's becoming a better person? Or that by helping me see things in a different way, is that being a better person? You know, or by engaging my mind and thinking new thoughts, you know, is that becoming better? So like, I think I agree with you, but I just would push back and to expand the scope of what it means to be a better person.
Right, and to that extent, that's why I like the last one, let my eyes behold the beauty of all creatures.
Yeah,
That's not, if I do that, that's not gonna feed anybody or clothe anyone,
yeah,
but yet that will, in your, the kind of the definition that you just gave, make me a better person as well.
yeah. So I think, and this is, it's good, I'm thinking about this and. Maybe it's something for all of us to think about is, in what ways. Can prayer, the act of prayer, and then specifically the liturgy that we read and saying that. In what ways can those things help us to become better? Because I think that the sages who wrote the traditional Siddur would also agree that the purpose of the prayers is to help us be better people. So like I've heard some, people say like, well, the traditional liturgy like is bunk or whatever, it's worthless. I want to focus on things that make me a better person. I think that the sages of our tradition would say, traditional liturgy is also supposed to make you a better person. What do you mean? It's not making you better, right? So let's think about that. Maybe that's something, an added question, meta question to be thinking about as we study prayer. All right, thanks. Okay, good conversation, everyone. So next time, we're going to, I want to read Samson Raphael Hirsch's comment on this. And then I want to look at, there's two other kind of substantive things I want to do. One is look at Maimonides' writings on the soul. He wrote a whole book about it. We'll look at some of it. And then I want to look at Yuval Harari, is a contemporary Israeli historian, and his writing on the question of soul, also very interesting. So we'll pick up with this next time.
When are we meeting again? Next.
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday is first.
Thursday after?
Oh, yeah. So we're not meeting then. No, we don't be.
Service.
Yes, we have a service at 10 a.m. next Thursday on the first day of Pesach. So no class, but then we'll meet the following Thursday.
That's the 13th.
Because that's after Pesach is over, and we'll resume. So 2 weeks. So yeah, everybody. Yeah,
Oh, it's the 13th today.
the 13th of April. Well, yeah, we'll resume this class on the 13th.
Nobody's like.
Yeah.